Almighty God, you see your children growing up in an uncertain and confusing world. Show them that your ways give more life than the ways of the world, and that following you is better than chasing after selfish goals. Help them to take failure not as a measure of their worth, but as an opportunity for a new start. Give them strength to hold their faith in you and to keep alive their joy in your creation. And as we pray this for them, may we be so bold to pray the same for ourselves, as we are your children, beloved children of the living God. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, friends, I am pleased to introduce Megan DeWald, Director of the Institute for Youth Ministry, where she oversees research, training, and resources for people engaged in youth ministry. With 2 decades of experience in youth and young adult ministry, she comes to her work with a lot of experience, and she shares that not only through her work specifically through the Institute for Youth Ministry, but she is also the creator and host of the podcast Disrupting Ministry, where she shares stories of innovative forms of ministry with young people that not only affect the young people, but permeate throughout the church. And she is also a collaborating author on the forthcoming revised version of The God Bearing Life, The Art of Soul Tending for Youth Ministry. Megan led our most recent Young Leader Formation workshop this past summer. And when she writes in her bio that she is passionate about nurturing connections and friendship among different kinds of people and equipping leaders, I can tell you personally that is not just lip service. I think it's safe to say that we were all really impressed, not only with the knowledge that she shared, but the energy that she brought to that workshop. And I was grateful to hear her earlier talking about how Amy Clarkson, the chair of Young Leader Formation, and Megan and I have developed a bit of a friendship for which I am grateful. Friends, I'd like to introduce to you now Megan DeWald.
Thank you, Steve. Wow. What an introduction. Thank you so much. That is so kind of you. To all of you who have gathered with us this morning, I greet you on behalf of Princeton Theological Seminary and specifically my corner of it, the Institute for Youth Ministry. I'm really grateful for your time this morning and want to kind of prep you that as Steve and Amy and I were talking about what this time could be, we decided that really the best use of this time is for those of you who have gathered, not to just hear from a quote unquote expert, a sage on the stage, so to speak, but to dive into the wisdom and experience and expertise that you already bring into the room. So the way that we're going to be doing that is we are going to engage in some small group activity, and I'm going to be taking you through a bit of a design process that will give you the opportunity to get to know some of your colleagues who do this work throughout the presbytery, and also just get to play a little bit in kind of the sandbox of youth ministry, which is by and large the work that the Institute for Youth Ministry is trying to get people to do these days. So I'm going to share my a PowerPoint with you. I have yet to figure out, I'm sure that those of you who are in the room know how to do this, but I have yet to figure out how to get this thing to show and be able to be on Zoom at the same time. So you're just going to get the background screen, and I hope you enjoy. So today our workshop is on building innovative youth ministry with young people. As Steve said, my name is Megan DeWald, Director of the Institute for Youth Ministry, and I invite you to explore the resources and opportunities that are present on our website at iym.ptsem.edu. In particular, I really hope that you'll take the time to sign up for our newsletter, which you can do in the upper right corner of that website. We send a monthly, sometimes more than once a month, but primarily we try not to flood your inbox with the latest research and opportunities to engage with the Institute for Youth Ministry. Our latest programs and offerings, courses, and resources come through primarily and initially that newsletter. So we really hope that you'll take that time to engage with us in that space. A little bit about the Institute for Youth Ministry, just for context. I know probably some of you in this room, I hope, were at our gathering that we were able to have at Johnsonburg in August. But for those of you who don't know a little bit about, what the Institute for Youth Ministry does, we were founded in 1995. So we're actually coming up on our 30th year anniversary by a plucky young PhD student who has now gone on to be basically the preeminent youth ministry scholar in the world, named Kenda Creasy Dean. Kenda and a cohort of others who really cared about youth ministry were very concerned with how youth ministry tends to occupy both a literal, sometimes, and certainly a theological basement in many of our congregations and churches. And she sought to find ways to bring us out of that basement. And so with our various initiatives, what we've really been trying to do is to understand and help people realize the seriousness with which God takes young people and the ways in which God is revealed in and through young people, and the seriousness with which young people take God. So we are really hoping always to connect the theological with the practice of youth ministry. It may look different than it does with children and with adults, but it's still a very critical part of the church, central part of the church even. So our mission is that we form Christian leaders for thoughtful, just, and creative ministry with young people. And we do this through a series of events, programs, and resources, as I mentioned. Today, I'm going to be really talking to you about a project that we run, a program that we run, that I would even invite those of you who are in the room to consider being a part of. We're in process of kind of revising that program so that it really is customized for the group of people that want to do it. So instead of it being something that is static and this is what we offer, take it or leave it, we've realized that what churches really need is thought partners who can be conversant with them in designing something specific for their context. So that's really what we aim to do in this project, or the program rather, is called the Log College Project. There's a whole backstory about why we've called it that. It has to do with the very origins of Princeton Theological Seminary, which we make the case was founded because of a passion for youth ministry. And you can hear more about that on our podcast, Disrupting Ministry, but I don't want to take too much of our time with that. Just know that there's opportunities to engage more deeply with the kind of material that we're talking about today. So what on earth are we doing today? Great question. I'm glad you asked. It's always good to have an agenda and set expectations at the beginning. So as I did, we will be diving into more of a workshop framework in our time together, which will include some breakout rooms and small groups. We're going to do that first in a getting to know you exercise, followed by a time where we'll engage with a business theory called the jobs to be done theory. We'll spend some time with that, and then we're going to move into a bit of a exploration of a design challenge. And we're going to take kind of some of the learnings from the job to be done theory and look at them and wonder about them, ponder together in this design challenge. And then lastly, we're going to end by giving you some time in your groups to prototype your own ideas that bubble to the surface during this time. Again, this is a time to play in the sandbox. And one of the great things about, or build, you can even think of it as like building sandcastles at the shore. The great thing about sandcastles is the waves and water are going to come and wash over those, and then something can be built anew. So I hope that you will engage with that playful, childlike wonder in yourself, knowing whatever you put out there doesn't have to be, high stakes. We're just kind of playing together as we consider what it is to love and serve young people in today's world. So on to getting to know one another. What are we going to do? So I'm going to break you up into some small groups here in a moment. And during that time, I'm going to ask that you will just introduce yourselves to one another. Some of you may know each other. I don't know who knows each other, so we're going to allow the magical Harry Potter sorting hat of the breakout room feature in Zoom to put you into groups. And I'd love for you to share your name and pronouns, your church and your location. Um, and then what I'd like for each of you to do is to consider the metaphor here of a sailboat. Show of hands, out of curiosity. Anyone ever been sailing before? Anyone? Okay, a couple hands I see. Excellent. All right. So one of the places I love most in the world is Seattle. I have good friends who live over there, and I just find every time I go, I like see bald eagles and grizzly bears. And I don't know what the deal is with me in Seattle, but we have a magical connection. Rainbows occur over over the city. It's just a beautiful place for me. And I always try to book a little sail trip in the Sound there. And it's just fascinating to watch the way they, the power of a sailboat really is in the sails, right? It's what moves the boat forward. So the metaphor here, what I'd like you to name for each other is, can you name what is a sail that you are seeing in your youth ministry? In other words, what is something that is moving you forward? What is something where you feel some energy, where it feels like there's some wind in your sails? Um, in some of these tours that I've done in Seattle on sailboats, sometimes they'll drop anchor to kind of keep us in one place just to enjoy the surroundings for a while. And so the metaphor that I want you to play with here too is, what might be an anchor that is grounding you right now? And grounding you doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But what is something that maybe is either holding you back or holding you in place in your youth ministry? What is something that feels like an anchor? So you will name, your church and location, your sail, and your anchor. Everyone understand the rules? Everyone understand what we're going to be doing? Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to give you, going to form these breakout rooms now, and I'm going to put 4 to 5 of you in each room. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do that, and then I'll call you back. All right? So everyone enjoy your time with each other. Again, I will put the instructions about what you're supposed to be doing in a message that I'll share with your breakout rooms. But on your mark, get set, enjoy. Got to meet some new friends.
Yes.
One of the absolute unabashed goals of the Institute for Youth Ministry is to help youth pastors make friends with other youth pastors. We don't talk about that enough in our culture, especially around adults. We think, people should just have their friends, and that's that. But it's important that we are connected to one another, and that we nurture this vocational friendship that we have with one another in getting to love God and love young people. It's a unique, high and holy calling. So thank you guys for engaging in that. I did want to note that one of the things I'm very interested in doing is being able to answer as many questions as come up for you throughout this time. So even if that last segment engendered some questions for you, I would invite you to either private chat me, or if you're comfortable, just place your questions in the chat. As we're going back and forth between our collective time together and then group time, I'd love to be spending some of the time when you guys are in your groups pondering some of the questions and thinking about how we can support those, maybe even addressing them now, or I can hang on to them and address them later. So please feel free to do that during our time. So I hope that was a helpful enterprise for you, a hopeful exercise of getting to imagine, what are some of the places where I'm experiencing sort of the wind in my sails, and where are some of the places where I'm feeling kind of rooted or maybe even stuck in place, and what are the commonalities that I feel around that with others that are in my presbytery, even in my inbuilt friendship group here. So for Our next section, we want to dive a little bit more into this question of what are these things that we're feeling really positive about, and what are the things that they're holding us back. So please keep in mind, hold in mind those fruitful conversations that you were having as we move into a discussion about the job to be done or the jobs to be done. So I'm going to say based on the writings and the videos I've seen around this that seem very 1980s. In the 1980s, a man named Chris Christensen, who is one of the professors at the Harvard Business School, developed this theory called the jobs to be done. And it's a business theory, unabashedly. I recognize we're dealing with ministry here, but it's a business theory that I think, and we at the Institute for Youth Ministry think, is kind of helpful for us as we realize the reality that we're in, where our youth ministries are facing unique challenges right now, and many of the old forms of doing youth ministry that we've relied on for the past, 30, 40 years are no longer seeming to really work well, or they're not really resonating with the young people that we're trying to serve. So we want to spend some time today just thinking about this jobs to be done theory. The theory is really a framework about why customers buy products. It's The theory goes that customers don't actually buy products because they enjoy the sensation of putting something in their cart and like going to the cash register and purchasing it, but rather that people hire products because there is a job to be done in their life. There is a problem to be solved or a desire to be fulfilled. And I mean, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. This morning, I wanted the job that I needed something to do was I needed a little pick-me-up. I needed to wake up, and I hired a cup of coffee to do that for me. Okay, so this is kind of the framework of this theory. I want to share with you a little bit about how Christensen developed this theory in something that we now affectionately call the milkshake story. So in the 90s, mid 90s, McDonald's, the big multi-billion dollar corporation, came to Chris Christensen and his organization at Harvard and said, "We need your help with something. We have a problem with our milkshake division. We sell these, what we think are great flavored milkshakes. And, we're McDonald's. We have a very sophisticated marketing department, and we have done focus groups with our customers who have, fit this particular customer profile of the perfect target to buy a milkshake. And we've brought those people in, and they've given us all kinds of feedback about our milkshakes, and every time that we've gotten feedback from them, we need, a thicker straw, or we need a little more chocolatey flavor, or anything about the milkshake. We have done that, and our sales are still just, marginally increasing. And we feel like this is a good product. Can you help us figure out why milkshakes aren't selling? So Christensen decided to take a tactic that was a little bit different than what McDonald's decided to do. And he decided to get himself and a team of people to actually go to their local McDonald's and to spend, a good chunk of time. I think he said something like 15 hours just sitting in McDonald's and watching and observing when are, who is buying these milkshakes? When are they being sold? What is the person, is the profile that McDonald's has in mind actually aligning with the profile of the real person who's coming in and purchasing those? And by doing that observation work, they began to realize something very unusual. Okay, so if I'm a milkshake consumer, which I am unabashedly, I find two reasons why I buy a milkshake. I go and I treat myself to a milkshake after I have either had blood drawn or had some kind of a medical thing where I'm allowed to eat afterwards, right? Because I don't like going to the doctor, and I'm 42 years old, but I still like to treat myself with some ice cream after a shot. Okay. So that's why I go and get milkshakes. But as Christensen was talking to these customers, he was realizing, he and his team were realizing that almost that 90% of the milkshakes that were being sold between the hours of 6:30 and 8:30 a.m. That is not someone that has probably just gone through a medical procedure and is treating themselves to some ice cream. Um, but it was mostly people who would come in, would purchase their milkshake, would get their milkshake, and then would leave, and then would get back in their cars and drive away. Or it was people who would come through the drive-through, purchase a milkshake, and then leave. So Christensen thought this was very weird because his assumptions, kind of like mine, are that a milkshake would be like a midday treat for people. So the next day, they decided to go back to the McDonald's, and they began to pull aside the people who had purchased the milkshakes and to say, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I noticed that you were purchasing these milkshakes in at 6:30 in the morning. I'm just curious if you could tell me why. What is it about the milkshake that seems, attractive to you at 6:30 in the morning?" And as they started to listen to these customers, what they started to learn was that the customer generally who was purchasing these milkshakes were then getting in their car and getting ready for their commute into work. So they needed something in the morning that would last for the duration of that drive, kind of keep them engaged, keep them awake, and was something that they were that was filling them up. And so that really interested Christensen to begin to think about, well, what else have you used before to try to meet this need? In other words, in his metaphor of jobs to be done, what else have you hired before to try to solve or to meet, to do the job of keeping you company throughout that drive and filling you up? And he had some customers think and say, I've hired donuts before. I've tried to hire donuts, but I can never eat just one. And by the time 10 o'clock rolls around, I'm hungry again. And he talked to another person who said, I've tried to hire a bagel before, but I can't just eat a bagel on its own. I need cream cheese, and it's kind of messy, and I'm juggling with the steering wheel and trying to get into work, and it hasn't been very successful for me. It really hasn't done the job. Um, and someone else said, I've tried to hire a banana before, but the fact of the matter is I eat it pretty quickly. And then by the time 10 o'clock rolls around, I'm really hungry. So I've just really needed something that I could take with me for the duration of this trip. So, in other words, by spending some time with these people and actually listening to what job they were hiring the milkshake to do, they began to notice some things. They began to notice the time of day when this purchase happened, which defied their expectations of when the purchases were happening. They decided to, or they realized that part of the job to be done involved this reason, this reason for purchasing and hiring a milkshake that they hadn't really considered before. That the person who hires the milkshake is trying to get to work and trying to have something to do and trying to have something that fills them up. They also didn't realize that their competition, so to speak, for this job was not making a better milkshake than Wendy's or than Burger King, or trying to have the best tasting milkshake on the market. That actually wasn't the job that the milkshake was hired to do in these people's lives. The competition, so to speak, were donuts and bagels and a banana. Okay. So one of the things that we've been thinking about in youth ministry quite a bit, at the Institute for Youth Ministry quite a bit, is how We are living in a time where it seems as though we have forgotten how to talk to our young people to really engage them with the question of what is the job to be done in youth ministry? We have a lot of competing pressures in youth ministry. And I think one of the reasons I think it's such a unique role and such a unique job for someone is that the person who, or the people who are tasked with this responsibility, have pressures from from the church leadership, from parents, from those who have gone through the youth ministry and feel a real nostalgic connection to it, and then from the young people themselves. But for some reason, and I think it has to do a lot with power, and the ways that power pans out, I also think it has to do a lot with the way we've written the job description for what youth minister is and what youth ministry is. We haven't really centered the experience of our quote unquote customer, of the young person themselves. And I wonder what would happen if we began to really connect with our young people themselves, to inquire of them when they show up to things that we're doing. Why did you show up? What job existed in your life that that you really needed some kind of fulfillment? I would I would venture to bet, and based on our data and our research we've done so far, we would venture very well to bet that young people are going to give us some very surprising answers. And that many of the answers that they give us are not going to look like many of our assumptions, and they're not going to look like the same answers that we're getting necessarily from those other constituencies. Because a lot of times, our other constituencies are asking of us to do things like save the church, right? So I've taken you off of the screen share for a moment just so I could see some of your reactions. And I'm just curious if anyone can name, or if I can get an amen, about anyone experiencing the kind of pressure as a youth ministry person, that it is incumbent upon you to get young people in the door of the church so that you can save the church. Can I get an amen? Any feedback? Any nods, any thumbs up, any any hand are you feeling that pressure? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I've certainly heard from people in colleague and clergy groups who are younger
Uh-huh.
that that's one of the reasons why they were hired.
Mm,
Was we're hiring a young person because we're hoping to attract younger people, younger parents to the congregation.
right.
You know, you would almost think like the prime candidate would be a late 20 something who had children, and they come to the church, and then all of a sudden people are going to flock there because of
That's
that.
That's right. We have a there's an exercise that I do that we've done before with the folks who are in the IYM Certificate in Youth and Theology program, where we ask them at the beginning of their journey to playfully name the characteristics of the perfect youth pastor. You know, so we kind of come up with this archetypal youth pastor. And what you've just described, Chris, is precisely the kind of thing that we hear again and again and again. You know, the stereotype is it's this young, attractive but not too attractive person, typically male. Let's face, you know, the reality of the world we're living in, who can play the guitar, right? Who wears jeans and a blazer really well, who's somewhat familiar with the Bible. Also, I must say, if I am describing you right now, Jesus still loves you. We're not dissing you. It's just these are the stereotypes that, you know, has a goatee, um, wears chacos, can come up with some really fun games, likes to do like competitive sports, has a real like way of kind of, you know, bringing people on board. That these are all the characteristics of this kind of archetypal youth pastor. Well, friends, the good news for you is that we have evidence that suggests that the archetypal youth pastor can do very well in youth ministry, but so can each and every one of you. As I'm looking at your faces or I'm seeing your names, we are convinced again and again that sometimes the very best youth pastor is someone who just listens and cares for young people and is prioritizing their spiritual experience and their journey with God and the journey of their lives. And that, the good news is, doesn't have an age restriction. It doesn't have a, physical appearance description that goes along with it. And we've seen again and again that some of the most transformational relationships in the lives of young people are folks that look just like you and me, folks that are, introverted, folks that are interested in Dungeons and Dragons, like folks that like gardening. One of my middle-aged hobbies that I'm really indulging in at the moment is birding. I live in this place that has all of these birds around, and I'm just obsessed with them. And I'm convinced that I can and do connect with young people about my love for birds. Anything that you bring to the table is actually that's fodder. That's stuff that God can use to transform the lives of young people. But yes, going back to the framework, this idea of the job to be done, the jobs to be done. I think that we are in a moment in the church, particularly the mainline church, like the Presbyterian church, where we are hiring youth pastors to solve the job, to solve the problem of young people are leaving the church, and that means that our church is going to die, that our church is going to close. And that's where all of the time and energy and anxiety goes. My challenge and opportunity for you today is to instead ask yourselves, what is the actual job to be done in the lives of young people? What is their experience? Why is it that they are engaged in anything that we do? What are their curiosities and questions around who Jesus Christ is? And how might that mean that what we then do, how we respond to that, is different than what the expectations or even our job descriptions say for us? So going back to this metaphor, one of the things McDonald's did after this research was they realized they had an entire breakfast industry that they could create to start really attending to the needs, the job that these customers were trying to hire something for, rather than only being able to go to McDonald's to get one of these milkshakes. They began to offer smoothies and a variety of coffee beverages. They began to think about things like, have you ever wondered why the hash brown is shaped in, if you've no one needs to, fess up. But if you've gone to McDonald's, like I bet all of us have, and you get a hash brown, it comes in that little sleeve. Well, they designed that sleeve so that someone who's in a car can be eating their hash brown without getting their hands too greasy. I mean, the thing still gets really greasy, right? But like without getting their hands too greasy, and being able to at least have the sense of like, I can shotgun this in my mouth if I need to as I'm driving, because my hands are on the steering wheel. They began to really flesh out and develop their whole breakfast menu items as a result of this research. And they weren't going to, that wasn't what their inclination, despite being a very multi-billion-dollar successful company, that wasn't what they were going to do. They thought something was wrong with their milkshake. Okay. We are seeing so many youth ministries that just continue to tinker with their programmatic models, primarily the programmatic model of the youth group, this age and stage sort of set aside ministry where we get young people all together in a room and we try to give them a little bit of Jesus, a little bit of fun, a little bit of food, and we keep just tinkering with that thing. Hoping that we're actually like solving, or that young people are going to keep hiring us for that job, rather than thinking, actually, what might be our breakfast menu that we're needing to think about? What might be the actual needs, the actual problems, the actual opportunities that young people are presenting us with, that we can play with the format of what we're doing. We can play with the programmatic options. We don't have to stay so tied to these former ways of doing youth ministry. What are some of those newness, the newness in that? So what I would love for you to do for the next, let's give you till 10 o'clock to do this, is to get back in those groups and to play with the metaphor of the jobs to be done theory in your groups, given the kind of sail and anchor that you spoke of earlier. So thinking about what's one of those areas that's giving me the wind in my sails in my ministry. Perhaps you want to play with that sail. That would be something we would deem like an opportunity for you, right? Begin to ask yourself, what is the job to be done? I mean, we're obviously hypothesizing about this. We don't have the young people present with us, but really dive into maybe what's the latest conversation you had with the young person? Why are they showing up? What is the wind in your sail? Or perhaps you want to spend some time with that anchor, and you want to say, what might be the job to be done, that in this thing that seems like it's holding me in place or holding me back or holding me down, what's going on there? What is the job to be done? What might the young people actually say that the job to be done is in that space? Okay, does this exercise make sense? Yep. Okay. And I encourage you guys to give each other feedback in those groups, to help each other really hone in on some of those jobs. We're going to give you till 10 o'clock to do that. And I'm going to break you up into those rooms. After that, I want to give you a little bit of a brain break because we've gone through quite a bit. So I'm going to pull you back at 10 o'clock and then we're going to take a 5-minute break. So just know that a break is coming. And so you have 8 minutes now. Go in peace and enjoy. Thank you so much. All right. So as we move into our last half hour of our time together, we are going to discuss a problem-solving tool that the Institute for Youth Ministry has been utilizing for the last several years. And part of how we got into working with this tool was realizing that research has shown us for the past 40 or so years that, number one, youth ministry resources have tended to predominate out of one particular theological and demographic region. And that has been primarily white, primarily upper middle class, primarily evangelical contexts, have been the kind of resourcing arm behind a lot of youth ministry resources. And what that has meant is that many contexts do not align and do not match that description, but the resources have often been positioned in such a way that what is told to folks who engage those resources is take this resource, plop it into your context, and if you do it right, it should work, right? This is kind of the language around youth ministry resources. And we began to realize that, we have been doing a disservice to those who are actually on the ground doing youth ministry by presuming as though something that worked in a megachurch in Southern California, for instance, is necessarily going to work in a more rural community in New Jersey or in an urban area in New Jersey. And many of the youth workers who we've worked with over the years have felt discouraged by trying to engage some of those resources and not having the kind of results that are spoken of in the book or resource. And so we began to imagine, what might youth ministers need that is not so much a product that they can purchase from us and then put in their context and everything will kind of come together well, but more, what is a process by which people might engage the process themselves and make it work in their ministry contexts. And as we began to do more research around this, what we began to realize where there was already a tool out there in the world for engaging with the kinds of problems that we were encountering in youth ministry. And so some of you are going to be familiar with this. This isn't rocket science. Spoiler alert, this isn't anything proprietary. It's simply a tool called design thinking. Earlier, Karen and I at the beginning of this were talking about how she's a graphic designer. So I bet, Karen, you're very familiar with the process of design thinking. But basically, design thinking is an entire ecology of imagination around how to solve a problem. It is one approach. It is not the only approach. It is not the holy grail of approaches, but it is one way of engaging with a community and a problem in a way that is a little newer, a little more nuanced, and might actually yield us the kind of contextual basis for our work that we're finding that youth ministers really need. So the stages of design thinking is kind of a 5-step process. You begin in design thinking with actually not ideation. We found in youth ministry and in ministry in general that many of you, I bet, are just idea generators. You have 1,000 different ideas. This is something you've become an expert in. But design thinking kind of presses pause for us and tells us to back up a little bit and say, wait, wait, wait. Before we rush to ideation around what we should be doing, maybe we need to start with a little bit of empathy. In other words, maybe we need to engage in a kind of research process that allows us to really understand who it is that we're trying to serve and what their needs are. So design thinking begins with the work of empathize. And when you empathize with your community, you are really engaging in that observational work, just like with our milkshake metaphor, rather than rushing to, hey, we've just been trying to iterate on this milkshake and we think it tastes pretty good and still sales aren't going up. What happens instead if we begin to actually interrogate and understand the people who are purchasing the milkshake? This is all a grand metaphor. I hope you understand. What if we begin then to ask our young people what it is that they need? What are their observations? What are their questions? So we observe, we also engage them. And some of the research that we need to do involves us immersing ourselves in that kind of imagination, in that kind of framework. A seminary professor I had once suggested that the best way to do that, or one of the great ways of being able to do that, is to conduct formal interviews with the young people in your care, just to sit them down, let them understand that you're engaging in a formal interview where your job is just to sit and listen. Another seminary professor suggested that a great way of immersing yourself in the life and experience of young people, many of you are going to know this, is to immerse yourself in what it is that they are immersed in. So how do you engage youth culture? You watch the shows that you hear are really popular. You go see the movies. You listen to the music. One of my favorite things to do is to read young adult novels that are bestsellers, because they give me a sense of like, how might this be igniting the imagination of young people? So all of that are some of the tools around how to empathize, how to really listen to and engage with young people. Then we move from empathy, from that listening to the needs and problems, into a model of really understanding what the problem is. And that's what the need and opportunity is. That's what that milkshake challenge really gives us the opportunity to see, is that if we just think that we need to rush to correct the milkshake, in our metaphor, if we just think we need to continue to like piddle around with youth group, perhaps we're not really paying attention to what the actual problem, opportunity, and need is that our young people are expressing. So definition is really about understanding the point of view of the young person and being able to state the problem, the opportunity or the need from their point of view. Only after these two phases do we then get to the ideation stage. Again, we are great ideators in youth ministry, but instead of rushing to ideation, if we slow down with these two things, what we then are able to do with ideation is to draw upon those first two steps to give us then the framework for how and what we ideate on. So rather than sitting around and saying, maybe if we had like Mario Kart in our youth ministry room, maybe if we had a cooler room, maybe if we got new couches, maybe if we got the right curriculum, maybe if we got the cool young hip youth pastor person, right? Instead, if we pay attention to those first two things, our ideation is permitted to have some constraints around it that then allow us to engage fully in the ideation process. Ideation has to be a process of kind of flaring, so to speak, a wild ideation process. We're going to experiment with that in a little bit. But that's what the ideation process is really on. It's generative, it's collaborative, it's creative, and it's in response to those first two stages. The next stage of the design thinking process is prototyping. And this is a difficult one for us in the church to wrap our minds around, mainly because I think, as we shared earlier, we in youth ministry feel so many pressures right now around the narrative of decline in the church. We often are kind of that ground zero for you need to go out and get young people because I mean it's almost like I call it vampire theology. Like we need young blood in our midst for our own immortality, you know, not necessarily to really engage with those people, but just to like suck their blood and keep us alive, right? It's very kind of creepy theological perspective that we have with young people. Instead, what happens with prototyping when we take the first 3 steps of the design thinking process and we just give something a try? And we recognize that failure or it not going according to plan is actually a good learning for us because in that prototype, we begin to experiment and ask ourselves, oh, that didn't really go as we thought, or only a couple young people engaged with this. I wonder what the other young people were thinking, or why did what were some of the ways that the young people who were present didn't really enjoy or engage their time? We tend to pour all of our eggs in one basket instead of just putting one egg in a little basket and throwing it out there and kind of seeing how it goes. We get to now have these like holy experiment moments, which is the real prototyping work of youth ministry. And then finally, we get to the testing phase where once we've prototyped enough and we played with enough variables, we can actually give something the real college try, so to speak. So those are the stages in the process of design thinking. What I'd like to invite you into today is to take the, your anchors and sails, the problem, the job to be done exercise that you did for each of your groups to just pick one. So one person's, job to be solved, problem or sail or anchor rather, and play together with what it could be like to respond to that particular need or that particular problem. So I, in the chat, am going to give you access to something called a Miro board. This is a tool that we use at PTS just to get some ideation in place around these different things once we've put these 2 steps together. What I'm going to invite you to do is to click on this link that I just put in the chat feature. And you'll see when you click on this link that it brings you to this website that has something that says group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5. That corresponds with the rooms that you're in your small groups. And each of these, you're going to see cursors going everywhere. It's kind of a fun, chaotic sort of a thing. But each of these is just a stack of sticky notes. And you can pull the sticky notes apart. You can click on the icons on the side. There's like a text feature there. You can click on the text feature and then click on a sticky note and write some text. If you get into your group and this feels too overwhelming, then you can go old school and just grab a sheet of paper and start writing things down. This is just an opportunity to play with something new. But what I would like for each of you to do is to pick one, or each of the groups rather, is to pick one of the opportunities that are present for you and just on those sticky notes or on your sheet of paper, play with some ideation. Now that you have really tried to refine what is, and define rather, what is the problem? What is the job to be done in my youth ministry? And we're going to give you a full, let's see, it's 10:19 now. So I'm going to give you a full 6 minutes to spend some time just ideating with one another. So spend some time in that space, and I'll call you back here at 10:25. Realize that we are playing with some artificial variables such as time constraints here that are not actually real in the real world. You have plenty of time to kind of think through all of this. But I hope that this just gave you a tiny sample, a kind of an amuse-bouche, if you will, of what can happen when we engage a design thinking process in reimagining what youth ministry can be. For those of you who are curious, we absolutely are going to, we are at, the correct answer to all our problems is 42, which is my age, which is from the thing, the show.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Hitchhiker's Guide.
You're in this
Hitchhiker's Guide, yes.
All right, how many of us are geeks that know that? Okay.
That know that. That's so great. And a way you can connect with
And you have your towel.
So please feel free to like refer to these boards again. We've made them public. So you're free to continue these conversations with your colleagues or to take these offline. I also will be sharing with you following this, absolutely the slides. All those slides are more background information. I'll be sharing this resource list with you so that you can access on your own time. What are some other kinds of activities around this ideation? What's an overview once again to design thinking? What are some faith-based resources that maybe you can use in continuing to do this sort of project? And then what are some examples of how this has really worked well with teenagers? So we'll be sharing this resource with you. I'll also share the slides and a link to a video I was contemplating having us watch, but rather felt like conversation was more generative than the video, regarding a company called IDEO and something called the Shopping Cart Challenge, which is just another kind of an imagination into how we might problem solve anew. So we've reached the end of our time for this workshop. It has come too soon, but we are really hoping that we can continue this conversation. Steve and I were actually just talking about how it would be lovely for us to continue these conversations with one another and your presbytery. So we are going to look at our calendars, and we're hoping that we will be able to find a way for the Institute for Youth Ministry to continue to connect this sort of work with what you're doing. The other thing I want to name is that if this has piqued your curiosity or whet your appetite for innovation at all, please do visit our website, and you can get a little taste of what the Log College project is like there. But as I said, we're really customizing this program to meet the needs of your community. So even if what's described there, which is an 18-month cohort-based project, is a little bit more beyond what you're thinking at this point, let's have a conversation and figure out how we might come alongside and serve you. We really hope that churches and leaders like you begin to work together to serve the young people in their communities, because we see that that's where the future of youth ministry is really heading. And we'd love to do whatever we could to encourage that sort of work. So please be in contact with us about that. Are there any other questions? Now we're kind of going past our time a little bit, but if anyone needs to leave, blessings, peace, God's love go with you. Anyone that wants to stay for, let's say I have 10 more minutes for some questions if anyone would like to stick around.